The light within the chamber of echoes was a cold, sterile blue, filtered through a kilometer of flawless, load-bearing crystal that formed the spire of the Imperial Citadel. It was a light that offered no warmth, only clarity, illuminating the silent figures of the Cathar High Council with unforgiving precision. Each of the assembled lords wore the stoic mask of their station, their multifaceted eyes unblinking, their chitinous carapaces gleaming like polished obsidian under the azure glow. Yet beneath the rigid discipline of 1,000 generations of conquest, a tremor of uncertainty had finally found purchase. It emanated from the central holographic display, a shimmering sphere of data that pulsed with a quiet, insistent wrongness. Floating in the heart of the chamber was the image of a ship. It was a human vessel. The designation, translated from their guttural, inefficient language, was the Vagrant. The name itself was an insult, a suggestion of aimlessness and insignificance. The ship's design was a greater one. It was a chaotic assembly of mismatched geometries, a jumble of spheres, pylons, and asymmetrical plates that seemed to have been welded together as an afterthought. It possessed no discernible bow or stern, no elegant lines that spoke of purpose or power, no visible weapon emplacements, no radiating energy signatures consistent with shields or reactors of a military grade. It was, by every metric the Cathar Imperium used to measure strength, an object of contempt, a piece of floating refuse. Grand Marshal Vorlag, his colossal frame straining the limits of his ceremonial armor, gestured a bladed forelimb at the hologram. The gesture was one of dismissal, but the tension in his mandible betrayed a deeper agitation. "It is a mockery," he rasped, his voice a low grinding of stone on stone. "A derelict, perhaps a colony ship that suffered a catastrophic systems failure and drifted into our dominion. The primitives have likely been dead for cycles, their frozen corpses a testament to their foolishness in venturing beyond their squalid little system." High Arbiter Xylia, seated opposite him, did not move. Her own carapace was of a finer, more delicate construction, etched with the intricate patterns of her diplomatic caste. Her focus remained on the data streams flowing around the holographic ship. "And yet, the 3 subjugator fleets we dispatched to that sector have ceased to report," she stated, her voice a calm, resonant counterpoint to Vorlag's grating tone. "The Vanquisher, the Iron Maw, the Emperor's Shadow." Their signal chains terminated abruptly, precisely as they entered weapon range of the anomaly. Not a distress call, not a single burst of energy data, not even the echo of a singularity collapsed from their warp cores. They simply went silent. Silence was a weapon the Cathar understood. The silence of a conquered world, the silence of a spaced enemy, the silence of absolute obedience to the Emperor's will. But this was a different kind of silence. It was a void in the fabric of their dominion, an absence where there should have been the thunder of imperial justice. "They are hiding," Vorlag countered, his clawed hand clenching. "The humans are cowards. They possess some novel form of stealth technology. They ambushed our fleets and are now cowering in the dark, hoping we will overlook them. They have underestimated the reach of the Imperium. I will take the Grand Armada myself. We will sterilize the entire sector, boil their worlds, and hang this piece of scrap above the capital as a monument to their hubris." Xylia's multifaceted eyes shifted, their internal lenses whirring as she processed countless scenarios. "Ambushed?" she queried, her voice deceptively soft. "To ambush 3 separate fleets, each arriving from a different vector without a single ship transmitting a final combat log, to neutralize their quantum-entangled communicators instantly across light-years of space. The energy required for such a jamming field would be greater than that of a supernova. We would have seen it. The entire galaxy would have seen it. But we see nothing. The Vagrant just floats. It does not power up weapons. It does not raise shields. Its energy output remains that of a dormant shuttlecraft." The chamber grew colder, the silence deepening. The other council members, warlords and strategists who had carved out entire star clusters for the glory of the Imperium, shifted uncomfortably. They were beings of action, of overwhelming force. The Cathar way was simple: identify the threat, apply disproportionate power, and erase it from existence. But how could one apply power to a shadow, to a question mark? "It is a trick," insisted a younger marshal, his armor still bearing the sheen of recent forging. "A psychological weapon. They project the image of a weak vessel to lure us in, while their true fleet lies in wait. We have scanned the sector with every passive and active sensor array at our disposal," Xylia replied, her gaze unwavering. "We have deployed tachyon nets and gravimetric resonance probes. We have watched the starlight from 1,000 stars for the faintest occultation. There is nothing else there, only this. vagrant, and the void where our fleets used to be." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The Imperium was an edifice built on certainty. The certainty of their strength, the certainty of their destiny, the certainty of the physical laws that governed warfare. The humans, with their silent, ugly little ship, were eroding that foundation. They were not fighting the Cathar. They were defying their understanding of reality itself. Vorlag slammed a fist onto the arm of his throne, the impact echoing like a fracture in the crystal around them. "This is semantics, philosophy. While we debate, an incursion into sovereign imperial space goes unanswered. It is a sign of weakness. Our tributary worlds are watching. Our rivals in the Cygnus Arm are watching. The Emperor is watching." He tilted his head towards the highest throne, a massive, unadorned seat of obsidian at the apex of the chamber. Upon it sat the Cathar Emperor, a being of immense age and power, encased in a golden sarcophagus of life-sustaining machinery. He had not spoken in a century. His will communicated through subtle shifts in the energy field that surrounded him, but his presence was the undeniable center of their universe. Today, his field was still, a perfect, unnerving calm. "I will not stand for this inaction," Vorlag continued, his voice rising. "I will not allow the legend of Cathar invincibility to be tarnished by a ghost ship and a committee of trembling scholars. I demand sanction to purge this human filth." Xylia finally turned her head, her gaze locking with Vorlag's. "And what if your armada meets the same fate, Grand Marshal? What if it, too, simply vanishes into the silence? Then we will not have lost a few fleets. We will have lost our primary instrument of power and control. We will have proven to the galaxy not that we are weak, but that we are blind. That there is a power in the universe that can erase us without effort, and we do not even understand how it is done." Her logic was a cold, sharp blade, and it cut through the Marshal's bluster. He had no answer, only fury. The fear in the room was not of the humans themselves. The Cathar did not fear primitives who lived short, chaotic lives on a single waterlogged planet. They feared the unknown. They feared a weapon that left no trace, a tactic that defied physics, an enemy that did not even deign to announce its own attack. For weeks, the debate continued. The vagrant remained in Cathar space, drifting slowly, inexorably, towards a nexus of primary trade routes. It ignored all hails, all threats, all automated warnings. It was a silent, patient intrusion. The Imperium, for the first time in its history, hesitated. They deployed long-range observation arrays, dispatched cloaked scout drones that skirted the edges of the silent sector, and analyzed every scrap of data they had ever collected on the species known as humanity. The information was laughably unimpressive. A young species barely interstellar. They had colonized only a handful of nearby systems. Their technology was a chaotic blend of elegant theory and brutish application. They engaged in constant internal conflict. Their societies were fractured, their philosophies contradictory. They were emotional, illogical, and ephemeral. They believed in concepts the Cathar had long since discarded as inefficient: mercy, individualism, hope. They were, by all accounts, no threat. They were a footnote in the grand galactic codex, a species destined to be either absorbed or erased by a true power like the Cathar. Xylia spent her time in the deep archives, her mind immersed in the captured data from humanity's primitive networks. She watched their art, listened to their music, read their history. It was a history of self-destruction and miraculous recovery. They would push themselves to the brink of annihilation, only to pull back and build something new from the ashes. Their greatest leaps in technology were often born from their most devastating wars. They were a paradox, creators and destroyers in equal measure. There was a resilience there, a stubborn refusal to adhere to a single, logical path that she found deeply unsettling. They were not predictable. They did not operate according to the cold, predatory calculus that had guided the Cathar to dominion over a third of the galaxy. While studying a human philosophical text, she found a concept that resonated with the current crisis. It was a thought experiment about an observer changing the outcome of an event simply by watching. It spoke of reality not as a fixed, solid state, but as a sea of probabilities, collapsed into certainty only by the act of measurement. To the Cathar, a ship was a ship. A weapon was a weapon. And reality was absolute, but what if, for the humans, it was not? The day came when the vagrant finally did something. It stopped its slow drift. It turned, its chaotic jumble of parts reorienting to face the Cathar capital world, trillions of miles away but a mere instant in hyperspace. And then it sent a message. It was not a broadcast. It was a single, tightly focused neutrino beam aimed directly at the Imperial Citadel, directly at the Chamber of Echoes. It was a communication so precise it was less a hail and more a surgical insertion of information. The chamber's holographic display flickered, the image of the vagrant replaced by a simple, two-dimensional waveform and a string of mathematical constants. Prime numbers, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, the fine structure constant. It was the universal language of intelligence, a greeting. Vorlag scoffed. After weeks of silence, they send us a child's arithmetic lesson. They are mocking us. No, Xylia breathed, her multifaceted eyes wide. They are not mocking us. They are demonstrating precision. They are telling us that they know exactly who we are, where we are, and that they can touch us at will. This is not a greeting. It is a summons. The council erupted into chaos. To respond was to acknowledge the humans as equals. To ignore it was to show fear. Vorlag argued for a preemptive strike, a wave of planet-cracking missiles that would obliterate the coordinates of the vagrant from spacetime itself. Xylia argued for communication. For the first time, she felt a sliver of genuine fear, not of destruction, but of obsolescence. The fear that the Cathar, in all their might, were simply an old and simplistic answer to a question the universe was no longer asking. In the end, it was the silent emperor who decided. The energy field around his throne pulsed, once a soft, deep indigo. It was the sign for acquiescence, for communication. The Cathar Imperium would speak to the humans. A channel was opened, using the parameters encoded in the human message. Xylia was chosen as the speaker, her role as High Arbiter making her the logical choice for this unprecedented negotiation. The great hololith in the chamber shimmered, and the connection was established. There was no grand preamble, no diplomatic fanfare, just an image resolving into focus. It was the bridge of the vagrant, and it was not what any of them had expected. It was not a military command center bristling with consoles and armored crew. It was a serene, open space filled with what looked like living, breathing flora. Light filtered down from an unseen source, dappling leaves and illuminating a single figure who stood in the center of the room, a human female. She wore a simple, unadorned gray uniform. Her hair was short, her features placid. There was no arrogance in her posture, no fear, no aggression. There was only a profound and unnerving stillness. "I am Captain Eva Rostova of the vessel Vagrant," she said. Her voice, translated by the Cathar linguistic engine, was calm and even. It held no inflection that the Cathar could interpret as emotion. "You are the High Council of the Cathar Imperium. We have entered your territory to deliver a message." Vorlag surged forward, his voice a roar that shook the chamber. "You have trespassed in sovereign dominion. You have destroyed imperial fleets. You will answer for your crimes before you are executed." Captain Rostova's gaze did not flicker. She looked at the raging Cathar marshal as one might look at a complex but predictable weather pattern. "There have been no crimes," she stated simply, "and your fleets were not destroyed." The statement was so absurd, so contrary to all evidence that it silenced even Vorlag. Xylia leaned forward, her mind racing. "Explain," she commanded, her voice sharp with a mixture of dread and intellectual curiosity. "The concept of destruction is inefficient," Captain Rostova said, her choice of words utterly alien to the Cathar mindset. "It is a chaotic release of energy that results in a net loss of information and usable matter. It is illogical. We do not destroy." "Then what happened to our ships?" Xylia pressed. "Our crews, our warriors." "They were unmade," the human captain replied, her tone as level as if she were describing a simple mechanical process. "The Vagrant is not a warship. To call it such is a category error. It is a quantum engineering platform. When your vessels approached with hostile intent, their core reality matrices were targeted. We initiated a controlled ontological disassembly." The chamber was utterly silent. The Cathar, masters of brute force, of plasma cannons and gravitic torpedoes, could not process the words. Xylia, however, felt a sickening sense of validation. Her studies of human philosophy, of their strange, probabilistic view of the universe, had not been a waste of time. "Unmade," Xylia whispered, the word feeling foul in her mouth. "They're exes." Tense was a complex, ordered state of matter and energy, Rostova explained. "We simply relaxed that state. We encouraged the constituent atoms and energy to return to a baseline quantum foam, a state of pure potential. No information was lost. It was merely returned to the universe's ledger. Your ships and their crews were not annihilated. They were edited. They have ceased to be a coherent pattern." The horror of it was 1,000 times worse than simple destruction. To be killed in battle was an honorable, if undesirable, end. It was a violent transition from one state to another, but to be edited out of existence, to be dissolved back into the fundamental fabric of reality, as if you were nothing more than a flawed equation being erased from a chalkboard. It was the ultimate negation. It was a statement that you were not just defeated, but that you had never mattered in the first place. Vorlag trembled with a rage so profound it seemed to be the only thing holding his massive form together. You monsters, you dare to call this soul-rending abomination, efficient. It is the most ethical application of force we have been able to conceive, Rostova said, and the sincerity in her voice was the most terrifying thing of all. It is clean. There is no suffering, no debris, no lingering radiation. It is a quiet, orderly cessation. We reserve it only for existential threats that refuse to engage in reason. Your fleets were given automated warnings. They ignored them. Their hostile intent was a clear and present danger to our mission. The logical course of action was to de-escalate the threat with minimal cosmic disruption. Xylia felt her mind reel. The humans had a weapon that could literally unmake reality, and they spoke of it in terms of ethics and cosmic tidiness. Their power was so absolute that their primary concern was not victory, but the philosophical implications of its use. The Cathar Imperium, with all its grand armadas and conquered worlds, was a child throwing rocks, and they had just thrown one at a god who was patiently explaining the laws of physics. Your mission? Xylia managed to ask, her throat constricting. What mission could possibly justify such an act? That is the message we have come to deliver, Captain Rostova said. Her calm expression finally shifted, replaced by something that looked grave. The Cathar Imperium in its current state is a danger, not to us, but to itself and to this galactic quadrant. A danger, Vorlag bellowed. We are the order, we are the strength that holds this quadrant together. You are a very loud, very bright flame in a very old, very dark forest, Rostova countered, her voice dropping slightly, gaining a new weight. And there are things that hunt by the light of such fires. Your empire's methodology, rapid expansion, total subjugation, overt displays of power, is a beacon. It is a specific pattern of energy and organized activity that attracts an unwanted form of attention. The human captain gestured, and the serene garden behind her dissolved. The hololith now showed a star chart, but it was unlike any the Cathar had ever seen. It was a map not of space, but of spacetime itself, showing the faint, ghost-like echoes of cosmic history. Faint, dark patches, like ink spilled on the fabric of the universe, were visible in the distant past of other galaxies. We are a young species, Rostova continued, but we are obsessive observers. We have studied the Great Filter not as a future obstacle, but as a past event. We have analyzed the cosmic microwave background radiation and found patterns, scars, echoes of civilizations that reached a certain threshold of energy output and then abruptly went silent. A silence far deeper and more absolute than the one your fleets encountered. She zoomed in on one of the dark patches. It was a fossil galaxy dead for billions of years. The pattern is always the same. A civilization rises, it masters its star, then its local cluster. It expands, its energy signature growing exponentially. It becomes an empire, and then it is harvested. The word hung in the chamber like a death sentence. Harvested. There is a substrate to the universe, Rostova said, struggling for a term the Cathar could understand. An ecology of phenomena that exists on a scale beyond our normal perception. Just as a simple organism on our world is unaware of the planetary ecosystem it inhabits, we are largely unaware of the cosmic one. There are predators, beings or forces that operate on principles of reality manipulation far exceeding our own. They do not consume matter in the way we understand it. They consume complexity, order, information. A thriving, galaxy-spanning empire is, to them, a ripe fruit ready for picking. Xylia looked at the star map, at the ghosts of 100 dead empires in 100 dead galaxies, and for the first time she understood the cold, terrifying logic behind the vagrant. The ship was not a weapon of war, it was a shepherd's tool, and the Cathar were a flock of sheep proudly announcing their position to the wolves. You are claiming, Xylia said, her voice barely a whisper, that you attacked our fleets to protect us. We did not attack them, Rostova corrected gently. We removed them as a threat vector. Their continued aggression would have escalated your empire's energy signature, pushing it past the threshold of notice. Our mission is one of preservation, not just of humanity, but of all developing intelligence in this galaxy. We are trying to keep the house quiet while the hunters are walking outside. The absurdity and the sheer, mind-shattering scale of the revelation washed over the council. They had built an empire on the principle of being the apex predator, only to be told they were nothing more than noisy prey, attracting a monster they couldn't even see. Their entire history, their culture of conquest and dominion, was not a path to glory, but a self-laid trap. Vorlag, however, could not accept it. His entire identity was built on the foundation of Cathar supremacy. This human narrative was not just a threat, it was an invalidation of his entire existence. "Lies," he roared, his voice cracking with desperation. "A coward's fantasy. You invent cosmic horrors to excuse your own weakness, your own fear of a direct confrontation. You are a parasite attempting to leech off the strength of true warriors. I will not allow this deception to stand. The Grand Armada is already underway. They will reach your position in hours. We will shatter your ship of lies, and then we will find your homeworld and salt its fields with the ashes of your people." He turned and stormed from the chamber, his pronouncement of war echoing in the suddenly vast silence. The other marshals, their own worldviews threatened, looked uncertain, but the tide of their martial culture was too strong. They would follow their grand marshal. They would choose the familiar path of violence over the terrifying path of understanding. Xylia watched them go, a profound sense of despair settling over her. She turned back to the hololith. Captain Rostova was still there, her expression now one of a deep, weary sadness. "He has made his choice," the human said. "The pattern will now play out as projected." "Your ship," Xylia said, her voice heavy with impending doom. "It cannot possibly withstand the full force of our Grand Armada. It is the culmination of 10,000 years of military engineering. It can crack a planet's crust with a single coordinated volley." "The Vagrant does not need to withstand it," Rostova replied. Her calm was back, but it was a different kind of calm now, not of peace, but of grim necessity. "We had hoped to avoid this. We had hoped your species possessed the capacity for reason when faced with a logically presented, evidence-based existential threat. We were mistaken. The final contingency will be enacted." "What contingency?" Xylia asked, a cold dread coiling in her gut. "The one reserved for a beacon that refuses to be extinguished," Captain Rostova said. "The one for a fire that threatens to burn down the entire forest. We cannot put you out, so we will have to move you." The connection ended. The serene image of the human captain vanished, replaced once more by the shimmering data sphere showing the lone, ugly ship in the vastness of space. For hours, a terrible silence reigned in the Chamber of Echoes. Xylia and the few remaining council members watched the tactical displays, which showed the Grand Armada converging on the Vagrant's coordinates. It was a magnificent and terrifying sight, a swarm of star-eclipsing dreadnoughts and cruisers, a river of steel and plasma that had laid low 1,000 civilizations. They moved with perfect, lethal grace, arranging themselves into an inescapable sphere of destruction around the tiny, motionless human vessel. Then the command came from Vorlag's flagship, the order to fire. On the tactical display, a storm of energy erupted. Lances of pure light, waves of gravitational distortion, swarms of matter-antimatter warheads, all converged on the single point in space where the Vagrant floated. The energy release was so immense it would be visible to the naked eye from the Cathar capital, a new, temporary star born of pure, distilled hatred. But the star never formed. Just before the torrent of energy reached it, the Vagrant changed. It did not raise shields. It did not maneuver. It simply unfolded. The chaotic jumble of parts blossomed outward, revealing a complex, shimmering latticework of impossible geometry. It was not a machine of metal and circuits, but something that looked like crystallized thought, a physical manifestation of a higher dimensional equation. It did not block the incoming attack. It absorbed it. The lances of light, the waves of gravity, the warheads, all of it was drawn into the ship's expanding structure, vanishing without a flash. Without a sound, the ship drank the full, planet-shattering power of the Grand Armada as if it were a single drop of rain. In the Chamber of Echoes, the Cathar were frozen, their minds unable to reconcile what their sensors were telling them. The Vagrant, now glowing with a soft, internal white light, had consumed their ultimate weapon and seemed energized by it. And then it pulsed. It was not a pulse of energy or light. It was a pulse of reality. A wave of pure conceptual change washed over the entire sector. On the star charts, the Cathar capital system with its star, its planets, and its moons flickered. The light from distant galaxies, a stream of information that had been traveling for millions of years, suddenly bent around them as if they were no longer part of the same spatial plane. Xylia looked out of the great crystal viewport of the spire. The familiar constellations were gone. The great river of the galactic disk was gone. The sky was now a soft, uniform, pearlescent white, a canvas wiped clean. There were no stars, there was no void, there was only light. A message appeared on her personal data slate. It was a text-only transmission, sent from the Vagrant in the final moment before the shift. The Cathar Imperium has been placed in a containment manifold, a pocket universe with its own localized laws of physics. Your star has been stabilized, your worlds are safe. You are isolated from the primary space-time continuum. The beacon has been extinguished. You are no longer a threat to yourselves or others. This is not a punishment. It is a quarantine, a sanctuary. Perhaps in time you will learn a new way to exist, a quieter way. We will leave you the archives of 1,000 civilizations that made the same mistake you did. Perhaps you will learn from their silence. We hope you do. The Empire was over, not with a bang but with a whisper. It had not been conquered, destroyed, or defeated. It had been filed away, put on a shelf where it could do no more harm. Grand Marshal Vorlag and his Grand Armada were gone, not unmade this time, but likely cast into the void between universes, their belligerence deemed too great a risk to contain. The Cathar who remained on the capital and its surrounding worlds were now prisoners in a gilded cage the size of a solar system. Xylia stood before the silent, empty throne of the Emperor. The golden sarcophagus was dark, its energy field having dissipated during the reality shift. The Emperor, like his empire, was no more. The Cathar were alone. For a long time she stood in the cold blue light of the chamber, gazing at the new empty sky. They had mocked the human warship. They had called it a derelict, a piece of scrap, a child's toy. They had been fools. They had been judging a book by its cover, while the book was, in fact, the author of a new chapter, and they were merely a footnote being written out of the main text. The human ship hadn't ended their empire. It had redefined it, reduced it from a galactic power to a cosmic artifact, a lesson preserved in a bottle. The true horror was not that humanity was more powerful. It was that they were more mature. They saw the universe not as a territory to be conquered, but as a complex and dangerous ecosystem to be navigated with caution, wisdom, and a terrifying, quiet strength. They were not warriors. They were gardeners, and the Cathar had been a weed threatening the crop. A new emotion began to take root in Xylia's heart, displacing the despair. It was not hope, not yet. It was a dawning, terrifying, and profound sense of purpose. The humans had left them a library of the dead. It was now her duty, the duty of all surviving Cathar, to study it, to learn, to understand the great, dark forest and the silent hunters within it. Their empire was gone, but their species had been given a chance to evolve. A chance to become something more than just a loud, bright fire. A chance to become worthy of the strange, incomprehensible mercy they had been shown. The first step, she knew, would be to learn the value of silence.